Welcome, Friends of Crimea. This is our first attempt to do a Zoom meeting of the Friends of Crimea USA. Several others of our group were not available today because they're involved in other activities. So the purpose of this meeting is just to express our solidarity with the people of Crimea in these difficult times. So I'd like to throw it first and pass it over to my dear friend, Bruce Gagnon, who's been here a couple of times. He's brought a delegation of Americans. I'm not sure the size. It was a large group on a study tour of Russia. They were in Moscow, St. Petersburg, and Crimea. So Bruce, take it away, and you're free to express whatever feelings you have about the people of Crimea.
Hello, everyone. Actually, it was a 2019 study tour. We had about 25 people, mostly from the US, a few other countries as well. It was a wonderful experience. People were beautiful. The food was wonderful. The scenery was incredible. The flowers were outrageously gorgeous. I don't know what else to say, really. But I'm happy to be part of Friends of Crimea. And I think it's important. It's important that we get people in the West, US and Europe, to have a different view of Russia. And it's so distorted by the BS that we get nonstop from our media. So anyway, I'll stop there and pass it on.
I think what's important that Bruce did not mention, he and I both traveled to Odessa in Ukraine for the May 2nd, second anniversary of the massacre in Odessa at the Trade Union Hall. And Bruce and I made a film, a short video at that time, where he described the crime at the Odessa trade halls. It's a very important film. And Bruce has been a real friend of not only Russia, but Crimea and the people of Ukraine. So thank you, Bruce. Mary Beth, why don't you take it next?
Well, I was grateful to be part of that delegation. And Crimea was a pretty important highlight for us. What I most remember is the experience in the 35th Battery. Bruce, I'm going to ask you to turn off your mic because I hear the echo. So you can hear me. Can you hear me? You can hear me just from being in the house together, right? Anyway. Yeah, that's great. So what I most remember was the experience of listening to people talk about living through the Nazi occupation of Crimea. My memory is that it was well over 400 days. And so the resistance to the Nazi invasion during World War II is a memory that is held to this day. The museum that we visited had images on the wall of family members who had died during the occupation, who had died in resistance to fighting the occupation of Nazis. And so it made such perfect sense to me when people explained in Crimea that once the coup d'etat happened in Ukraine in 2014, and laws were discussed and passed that said you can't speak Russian in this new definition of Ukraine. And there was an Azov battalion and others who identified as Nazis who are fighting for the Ukrainian army, that sent a chill into the community and a need to say, how do we protect ourselves from this? And so the referendum that was organized, that brought people to this clear place that they wanted to become part of Russia instead of staying with Ukraine, and feel some sense of protection from Russia, for whatever ambitions Ukraine might have in the eastern part of the country. That made such logical sense to me. And so, the narrative that Ukraine was invaded by Russia, that Crimea was invaded by Russia, or that it was annexed by Russia. I'm not sure how to put my head around the mainstream media and our government's articulation of what happened to Crimea. And I have to say, Regis, I get worried. I've heard, every now and then you hear, oh, Crimea is next. Ukraine really does want to take back Crimea. And there's one side that said that's ridiculous, they'll never do it. There's another side that says it's possible. And so I live with this great dread and great fear that is on some military planning board, and that overwhelms me. Not really sure what to say or do about that. So anyway, those are my thoughts about Crimea.
Well, you have more thoughts about Crimea. I know that because you met several people in Crimea. You met Valentina. Tell us about that.
So Valentina is an incredible woman who runs a school and education program for children and youth that have disabilities. Some of them are orphaned. And it's this beautiful program full of life, full of love. Clearly, it's a place where children and youth feel safe, and where they grow and flourish. That is the truth about what's happening in Crimea. And I'm sure that, there's a gift in living life without being worried about war, right? And Valentina has shown a way to engage youth that have been abandoned, and to bring life and love. So that's what we should be nourishing. That's what should be happening.
And you came here with a lot of love, and you received a lot of love.
Yes.
And this is what I hope that so many, I'm sorry that I get emotional, but I wish so many other people could experience what you did. I'm sorry.
Regis, this is a sign of the times. What we experienced was profound connection, brilliant people who sacrifice for each other, and work to keep their own community safe. It's a beautiful place to visit. I want to go again. I want to come and be with you guys.
Okay, let's go out and hopefully get a little more sober. Tony Long out in San Francisco.
Can always count on me for sobriety. Well, I'm here, as I think most of you know, I'm here because of a lifelong admiration, love for Russia, for its culture, and its respect for its history. And it's been a part of my life, all of my life. Unlike a lot of you, though, I haven't had the chance to go. I was actually had applied to join the CCI trip this year, which of course had to be canceled. And so I'm hoping to come next year. I'm fairly bullish on the war. I mean, war is a horrible thing, and only a sociopath would want a war. But now that there is one, and there has been one for 8 years, I'm looking forward to the Russians settling it and winning it, and then settling the peace. And I think that's the only way there will be peace in that part of the world, that the Russians, in fact, do have to win it, because any negotiations that leave the West in any kind of position of influence will only lead right back to where we just were. So I think the Russians need to win it decisively, and I think they are winning it decisively, despite what you hear in the Western media. Although the Western media is beginning to show some cracks and beginning to deal with a little bit of realism, you are seeing, I mean, when this Donbass campaign ends, probably pretty soon now, I think the Russians are going to have a free skate pretty much the rest of the way. That aside, for myself personally, I want to come there. I want to stay there for a while, and I would even consider staying permanently if that were possible. I mean, that's a wish list thing that's way down the road. But I've thought about it for a long time, and I think, given the state of this country, the United States, I have the only thing keeping me here, a small family and a circle of good friends. Other than that, I'm as free as a bird. And I could easily see myself leaving the United States. I've been attracted to the expat life all my life. And now I live in a country I don't even recognize anymore. And not that it was all that great to start with, but it's awful now. And I mean, the recent events here, the things, and I'm not talking about January 6th as much as I'm talking about Roe v. Wade and you know, this obsession we have with guns and stuff. And I just don't recognize this country anymore. And I look at Russia, and I look at Russia as a sane place, a conservative country. And you know what? Even though I'm a flaming leftist, that kind of conservatism actually sort of appeals to me. And I could live in a society like that, you know. So, I mean, I'm here to support not only Crimea, but Russia at large. Crimea is very high on the places I would like to see, Moscow and St. Petersburg. I want to go to Volgograd to pay homage to the Battle of Stalingrad, which has always been a big part of my historical consciousness. And I'd like to see the Red Army Band and Chorus in Russia. I saw them in San Francisco in 1964. I'd like to see them again in Crimea, maybe, perhaps, or in Sochi, maybe. But that's why I'm here. I'm here as an admirer of Russia and of its culture and of its people. And that's why I'm here.
Well, thanks, Tony, for being a good friend of mine, a good friend of Russia. And I wouldn't put off those plans to come here for too long. It's still possible to get a visa. The biggest hurdle is, I think, financial, because now the airplane tickets are really out of sight. But once you get here, it's much more affordable by a long shot than back there in the United States. So I wouldn't put that off for too much longer. Let's go out. Let's go out to South Lake Tahoe and our dear friend Riva. Riva and team, take it. Turn your mic on.
There we go. And I'm honored to be your dear friend, Regis. And we all need to cry. And like Tony said, I haven't thought about being an expat most of my life, but I am now. And it is unrecognizable here. And the fact, I mean, last call I told you, I might have just lost a friend of 52 years because she doesn't want to talk about that there might be a Nazi problem. I'm Jewish, she's not. It's like, give me a break. Mary Beth, both of you, it was really nice to hear you. I'm going to start crying too, but it is a blessing to live in a place where you don't have to worry about bombs falling. And I do worry that Crimea is on the board somewhere because they're saying it. And I was also thinking when, we all came on again today and we're all gray hair, they're beginning to say that it's only us gray hairs that are really worried because we remember what the threat of nuclear war is. And the millennials and all these people, la, 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 social media, I'll believe anything they tell me, brain dead, brain dead. In fact, I say this too. It's interesting where you find your friends these days, right? So in South Lake Tahoe, I was raised in New York, Jewish socialist. I raised my kids in San Francisco. South Lake Tahoe was the first place I met Republicans, frankly. But I have two friends here. Well, now they listen to Jimmy Dore and stuff. But at a certain point, I said to her, 28 years old, Kaja, I didn't realize how radical you were. And she said, I'm not radical. I just ask questions. And this is what I'm saying to my friend who said, no, there's no Nazi problem. How can you not ask the next question? I wish I felt more hopeful. And I also could, I'm finished with my mortgage in August. I also could be free as a bird, except that I have a dog and kids, but you know, Zoom and who knows, maybe Regis, I'll meet you there because it's really horrible here. So what I do is I rent kayaks and I put people out on the water and they come back smiling. And these days, that's what's making me feel good. Good to meet you all, new people and old friends.
Well, Reva, I want to mention that you have been to Russia, but you did not get to Crimea.
Right, me and
And
culpa.
so Crimea has got to be on the top of your destination list, the top of your bucket list. And if you get here, together with Bruce and Mary Beth and Tony and others, we will welcome you with open arms.
Well, thank you. I might take you up on that. So we will certainly stay in touch. And I predict in the next 6 months, and I don't know anything. I don't have stocks, but man, it's going down fast. So Tony, if you're free as a bird, I would fly away. Anyway, I'll sign off now. Thanks a lot, guys.
Oh,
Bye-bye.
Reva, thank you for being such a great friend for quite some time now. Betsy Weil is back. Betsy in Chicago.
Yeah, sorry, my son was checking the system. He turned it off. So it took me a while to get back. Yeah, and I want to mention too, I'm glad to see Bruce there. We've never met, but I've really enjoyed, well, your programs, Regis, and Bruce's very wise comments about everything that's going on. Thank you so much. And I'm from Colorado Springs, or at least we spent many years there. So you might know, we might have some mutual friends there, including Steve Handon, who recently died. Anyway, thank you for your involvement and participation in the same issues, different parts of. Well, I was going to. My husband spent a lot of years in Guatemala, actually, and that's where I met him after he came back to the States. And after our youngest was 3, we have 4 kids. We went to Nicaragua. We were there from actually on the border of Honduras from 86 to 88. It was during the Sandinista War, and so we were quite involved in aspects of that, and that got me to other places too. You know, just having that experience. To Mexico, to El Salvador, sister community that we formed there in El Salvador, to Iraq after experiencing the sanctions in Nicaragua. I wanted to see what the sanctions were like in Iraq. Yeah, and also with Russia, the Russian military was helping the Sandinistas during the Contra War. And we had a friend who lost his bus to the Contras, and the Russians helped him buy a new bus. So that was part of my interest in Russia, you know, the fact that they had helped out Nicaragua so much, and they still are. Good friend of Nicaragua's. Yeah. And the trip to Russia was very, very special. Very special, every aspect of it. I have a list of people who are with me. I couldn't remember their names, but I had to pull out the list. David, what's his name? I didn't know him very well. He's an activist. What is his name, last name?
David Swanson.
Swanson, yeah, he was on that trip. Ervoje, with geopolitics and empire. He does that. Yeah, a bunch of really activist. So it was just.
So that must have been the group with Ann Wright, Colonel Ann Wright.
No, she wasn't on that trip. This is
Really?
2017. Yeah, I think she went after us. Might have been 19 or something like that. Yeah.
Working.
I think it's this one that's working.
Oh, the shoe shots, you're back. Don't do anything. We'll come to you in just a minute. Don't do any. Now go ahead, Betsy, continue.
Yeah, that's about all I have, but I just say
Hold
the
it
trip
a
was
minute
just
while I get this thing.
the trip to Russia. Now, one thing I remembered, I keep on telling people, when we went back, we landed in St. Petersburg. We flew to St. Petersburg. The man who picked me up, I don't remember his name. He's a friend of Sharon's. The way that the U.S. media was treating his country, he was really angry. Much reason. But I tell people, you need to think about this. How you're treating their country and their leaders and so on. So that they're honest. They were honest with us.
So Betsy, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to connect with you. Let's go now to John and Carrie Schuchart, who I can see now. I can see you. Turn your microphone on, John, and say hello.
Well, I don't know if I.
There you go. There you go. Wonderful.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. John and Carrie Schuchart from Ipswich, Massachusetts, and the House of Peace. John, oh my God, it's so good to see you. Say hello to everybody.
Well, hello. I'm sorry that I'm technologically crippled here, but I think something's connected now. Greetings, and I'm sorry I've missed what you've already spoken, so I feel a bit out of it.
Basically, John, share your experiences of Crimea, your support from Crimea, and your experiences of coming to Russia in that wonderful trip that you made with Bruce. You were part of Bruce's group.
Yes, well, it was a tremendous opportunity and a tremendous experience for Carrie and myself. We spent an additional week beyond the 3, so we were there almost a month. And he realized that all of my life has been an obsession, all of my conscious life, an obsession with Russia, the Cold War and the Cuban Missile Crisis. And then you realize you really don't know basically anything about Russia. And it's quite a shocking self-revelation that you've been so manipulated into a mindset about something that you really don't are so vastly ignorant and uninformed and have no experience with. I think, of course, we fell in love with Russia. We fell in love with the Russian people. They were all warm and welcoming, which is pretty impressive when you consider that they're well aware of the hostility of the United States and the unremitting lies and propaganda and distortions of the United States. So to be welcomed as an American is really, really moving and humbling. And what came into focus for me very, very strongly being in Yalta and thinking about these World War II meetings was that where did the Cold War start? Where did this hostility begin? And clearly, it was clear that it began at Potsdam when Truman was on the way to the Potsdam conference with Stalin. Churchill was out of office, and it was at Attlee and Roosevelt had died. So Truman gets news that the Trinity test in Alamogordo was successful, and he's got the atomic bomb, and he begins to, I just say, kick Stalin around at that point. And that's where who initiated the Cold War. That's where the hostility began. And then I was so stunned to look at the website of NATO and see that the historic banner headline that the purpose of NATO, the entire purpose of NATO, is to keep the US up and Germany down and Russia out. And Carrie and I are students of anthroposophy, and Dr. Rudolf Steiner has pointed out from his insights into the world evolution of world history that East and West must meet. And Russia is the place where East and West must meet. And it's so written in bold headlines now that this is a war of the West against the East, that it's fulfilling the primary goal of NATO, that it for whatever deeper reasons that the U.S. Controlling NATO together will absolutely prevent that meeting in the middle. Russia is the middle. Russia is the essential key for the reconciliation or the unification. I'm not sure the right terms, but the healing of the world family has to take place in the middle. So what is transpiring now is of obviously world historic consequences. And, it was so shocking that when the foreign minister of Russia was going to fly to Serbia, he was threatened with being shot down. And the public officials, I forget whether it was the Secretary of War here or who it was, told Serbia, you're either with us or against us. This is your moment of decision, and either join the West or not. So that term, the West, has much greater significance, and the determination to stop the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which was signaled very, very early, months before February 24th. And I was stunned to read in our paper that the board of directors of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline was the former chancellor of Germany. This integration in the middle was happening at the highest imaginable level. The chancellor of Germany was going to be running the Nord Stream 2 pipeline from Russia to Germany. The integration at the human level, at the political, at the economic level was happening. And in some kind of insane and evil act of desperation, the US has launched this war against Russia, and Ukraine is the sacrificial victim. And realizing that the Ukrainian army is firing on Ukraine and the Russian army is firing on Ukraine, NATO seems so cynical and so cruel as to allow the complete destruction of Ukraine by the Ukrainian army firing on their own land and territory, and the Russian army. So we're in the latest escalation, cutting off Kaliningrad. Learning in our trip to Russia that Russia was landlocked, we realize how incredibly important Kaliningrad is. So Lithuania's under U.S. direction, cutting off the rail link is the next terrifying development in this. And I don't see an exit, Regis, friends. I don't see an exit.
John, I just read where the EU has come out formally and said they will not support the Lithuanian blockade of Kaliningrad, which is really incredible. Now, John, Carrie, I can see is logged on, but I don't see her microphone or her video. Can she come in the room with you and say hello to everybody and express a few words?
Okay, let me see.
Yeah, go ahead. Don't touch anything. Just, there you go. I want everybody to know, well, Bruce and Mary Beth know, John and Carrie have been running the House of Peace for some close to 30 years now, I think, where they take in refugees, and had been primarily from Iraq, from the Middle East, and people who were injured and wounded, and they take them in and they provide shelter for them. It's really quite a miracle that John and Carrie have been involved with for, I think it's got to be 30 years now. It's in Ipswich, Massachusetts. And they're very, very special people. I have been, there she is. Oh,
Hi, Regis.
everybody.
Sorry, I'm with the rest of the flock here. How are you, Regis?
No, Carrie, sit in John's. Okay, whatever you're gonna, there you go. Your dad said,
Okay.
everybody, this is Carrie Schuchart. John and Carrie are two of my very, very dear friends. Carrie, we have a small group today. We're about 9 people. But basically what we're doing, we're expressing our solidarity with the people in Crimea. And you had a wonderful experience in Russia. You and John came with Bruce Gagnon's delegation. Share with us a little bit of your experience in Crimea and how you were touched by that experience when you were here.
Well, thank you, Regis, and greetings to everybody else who's there. As John probably told you, our time in Crimea was really a high point, not just of our visit to Russia, but also in our work in general in the realm of peace and justice, and our longing for people to come together in creative ways to try to establish new methods and means and commitments for peace building. So we had these wonderful experiences. One of them, of course, a high point was meeting with people in Crimea who were able to give us documentation and information having to do with Crimea voting to return to Russia and having a sense of solidarity with each other and all people in terms of upholding their right to determine their future. So we had just warm and very objective and very solid kinds of conversations with people and panels and different things that wonderful Tanya had arranged. We also had this experience of visiting the Black Sea, going to the wonderful camp there, Artek, where we were able to be together in a special way around one of the symbolic figures from the United States, Samantha Smith, who as a young girl, as you know the story, went to Russia to really stand as an ambassador for the children of her generation, hearing from Russia the wonderful commitment that none of us want nuclear war. And Samantha was a tremendous leader in that. And the time we spent there with people in Crimea and experiencing the wholeness of that place was really life-changing. And for me, the most profound experience was going to, I guess what we call it, Regis, the barracks, where it was kind of the last stronghold of Russian soldiers holding out in the Second World War against the Germans, and seeing and experiencing that holy sacred place where so many people died, and feeling in Crimea the commitment that not happen again, that those lives not have been lost in vain, that those young people who in the museum there, you see their faces transformed into stars and with beautiful music playing and helping us all to remember that this catastrophe of war that has so marked Russian history and Crimean history never be repeated. So John and I turning our thoughts to Crimea right now with all the tremendous agitation and all the fears of escalation, all the reality of escalation, as to Crimea as real leaders in trying to pave a way for negotiation and the voice of the people to be heard. So just off the top of my head, sorry if it doesn't hold together, but it was an experience that we will never forget, that we've tried to share with many people, that we continue to share, and that we're so grateful to have had in our lifetime at this point. So we wish you well and are thinking of you all the time.
Well, thank you so much, Carrie Schuchart. It's important for people in Crimea and in the rest of the world. There are 30 other countries that support Crimea, that are Friends of Crimea clubs. It's important for all of these people to know that there are Americans like you who care, and Americans like all of you who have participated to share your own personal experiences of Crimea, the truth about Crimea, and your experiences that you discovered in Russia. So I want to thank you and all of you for that. We've had two other really good friends of mine join. I'm going to go first to Elizabeth Murray. I think, where are you anyway? I keep forgetting. Are you in Portland or somewhere in Oregon? Elizabeth, turn on your microphone.
Yes, good morning, Regis.
There you are. Oh, so good to see you again, my friend. Where are you anyway?
It's great to see you. Well, normally I am based in Washington State, so you're geographically correct, but I have been spending time in Southern California caregiving for my mom, and that's where I am right now. I'm a full-time caregiver here. I certainly can't complain about the weather. It reminds me a little bit of the Crimea, actually.
So just so people know, Elizabeth spent her whole career in the CIA, and she and I did a wonderful interview about her life and her experiences in the CIA. It's on my YouTube channel. Highly recommend you watch it. But Elizabeth, tell us about your experience of Russia.
Oh, yes. Some of you may know that, or may have joined Sharon Tennyson's citizen diplomacy delegations to Russia, and I was among the fortunate people to be in a delegation that included luminaries like Anne Wright, Kathy Kelly, Ray McGovern, David Hartsaw, and other amazing peacemakers. And this was a number of years ago, I guess about four or 5 years ago, I think it was, probably just 4. And we visited 6 different Russian cities. And obviously the highlight for most of us was the Crimea, Yalta, Sevastopol, some of the same experiences that Carrie related about the great sacrifice of the Russian people and the siege there. And basically my personal impression is that the Crimea really is a jewel. It's the jewel in the crown. It's a beauty spot. It's no wonder why it's been coveted by so many empires over the years, including ours right now, which scares me to death. It's strategic. It's just beautiful in every way. And of course, like several of you probably, I visited there during the time of American imposed sanctions. So the usual fleet of cruise ships was missing. There were no sort of people from Finland or the other people that usually come during the summertime. But at the same time, then it meant that was a great opportunity to see Russians on holiday strolling around Yalta, enjoying their own beautiful country. It was great to meet the translator Tanya Bukharina, who currently I think assists Regis a great deal, but she gave us a wonderful tour, and we visited basically all the places that Carrie mentioned as well. So I don't want to repeat myself, but I just want to leave you with my general impression of Crimea as a wonderful, warm beauty spot where Americans or anyone felt most welcome. The people there are very open, have in general wonderful memories of that golden Samantha Smith era in the 80s when anything seemed possible in terms of future ties with the United States. It was kind of a golden era. I mean, I know that Gorbachev did not enjoy the same popularity in Russia as he did in the United States, but still, I'm sure, no doubt that the perestroika and glasnost movements filled Russians and Americans with hope and optimism for the future. And actually, Tanya just did me a wonderful favor yesterday. She translated a set of amazing peace posters that were painted by Russian school children in the 1980s. And they are actually going to be, they were given to a school teacher in Seattle that had an exchange with Russian students. And Tanya was kind enough to translate those posters, which kind of had been gathering dust, but we're organizing, I'm helping to organize David Swanson's World Beyond War Peace Wave on the West Coast, which is actually happening later today between 2 and 4 p.m. And we wanted to show these Russian posters just as an example of the kind of goodwill that exists between between the Russian and American people. I mean, I always say it's the governments, not the people. I think most people are open, at least those of us who have not been thoroughly brainwashed, or those who don't, just so freely believe all the nonsense we're bombarded with on a daily basis from our media. But I'm proud to be a member of the Friends of Crimea, and despite these times of tension, I like to hold out hope that if people on both sides of the Atlantic continue their outreach toward each other and their goodwill, that it's always possible for good to prevail, despite the warmongers' lust for profit and blood, unfortunately. But anyway, Crimea is a beautiful place, and I'm very envious of you, Regis, for getting to live there full time. So.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. I wanted to point out, John and Carrie, as well as you, Elizabeth, mentioned Samantha Smith. Well, Samantha Smith came from the state of Maine, which is where I was born. And there is a statue of her close to the Maine Capitol in Augusta, right next to the State of Maine Museum. She was a young girl who wrote to Gorbachev and pleaded with him to do everything he could to get rid of nuclear weapons. As Carrie and John said, she went to Artek, which is where hundreds, maybe thousands of Russian kids come every summer to spend time there in this context of peace and friendship, where they learn with each other. And Samantha went there, and she died in a very mysterious plane crash outside of Lewiston, Maine, with her father. Her legacy will be remembered forever. And I wanted to point out that John and Carrie founded, correct me if I'm wrong, John, the Veterans for Peace chapter in Ipswich, Massachusetts. And its name is the Samantha Smith Chapter of Veterans for Peace. John and Carrie, thank you for preserving that memory. Now, with that, thank you, Elizabeth. We're going to go to my final friend. Oh, he has become such a dear friend. I've never met this fellow. He is in Thailand. Eric, I know you're there. Turn your microphone on and say hello to this wonderful group of friends and Friends of Crimea. Turn your microphone on. Your microphone. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Oh, Eric, I hope you can get that microphone turned on. Eric? The little on the left side, bottom of your screen, microphone. Is your microphone connected?
Okay, the microphone's on, but now you have to turn your volume up maybe, Eric, because we can't hear your voice.
Yeah, it looks like you're connected, Eric. Oh, I do hope you can get that going. Well, while he's trying to do that, I do want to thank each of you. I think it's very important. It's very important for people in Crimea, especially, and the Friends of Crimea in 30 other countries, to know that there are people in America, many more than just the friends who have gathered here today, 10 of us, who understand what is happening in Crimea today, in Ukraine, and who are supportive of the people in Crimea. Eric, do you have your microphone on? Bruce Cagnon has his hand up. Bruce wants to talk. Bruce, you go ahead, and we'll hope that Eric can get connected.
I just wanted to say something about NATO. They're having their big meeting in Madrid this coming week, starting on Tuesday. NATO is, as everyone, of course, knows, is expanding right up to Russia's border, but at the same time, they're trying to expand into Latin America. It was Colombia already become one of their partners. This recent election there might slow that down a bit, I hope. But at the same time, they're trying to move into the Middle East. Jordan has said that they're ready to help the U.S. and Europe create a NATO extension out there in the Middle East. And then also at the same time in the Asia Pacific, where several countries, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, and a few others are partners. And so NATO is really, to me, it's a criminal alliance, and it's wanting to circumvent the United Nations, because at the UN, if you want a resolution to get international support to attack somebody, you have to go to the Security Council. But Russia and China are able to veto any such resolutions there. So NATO is trying to create this impression that it's the real international alliance, the Freedom Alliance, if you will. And so they won't have to ask anybody's permission before they start wars. Also, I saw today one of my friends posted, a Japanese friend posted, that the US is inching up on moving nuclear weapons into Japan to be used against China and also North Korea. So I think we all need to do what we can to help the public have a greater understanding about the dangers of this growing cancerous NATO. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Yeah, I would like everybody to know, some of you know Bruce. He is one of the founders and the coordinator or director of the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space. He's been at this for more than 25 years. He is probably the preeminent expert in the world on the issues about space, weapons in space, nuclear power in space, the United States Space Force. And not only that, he is one of the best analysts of what has been going on geopolitically in the world for the past 25 years. His website is space, the number 4, peace, space for peace. And he writes a blog every day, which is called Organizing Notes. I'll put the link in the description to the show. Now, so Bruce, thank you for that. Eric Arno is coming back. And Eric, can you hear us? Do you have your microphone working? You have the floor. I can see you, but I still can't hear you. Can you adjust your volume? Can you adjust the volume of your microphone? Okay, well, let me speak for Eric. Eric has become a very dear friend. He's an American who has lived in Thailand. He's lived in China. He's currently living in Thailand. He has been a student of Buddhism. He's been actually a monk. He is a very brilliant mind, a very astute philosopher, a very astute student of religions and philosophy. Eric has visited Crimea and especially Sevastopol, where he met some common friends of ours. He has been longing to return. I think Eric had a plane ticket to come here, but I think with sanctions, he wasn't able to complete that trip. But he's been longing to return. He is just a wonderful friend of Crimea. I wish that his microphone worked so that he could really speak for himself. But Eric, I want to thank you for joining. I don't know what's wrong with your microphone because we've had it working before when we've had conversations, but I'm sorry that I can't do justice to your thoughts, your feelings, and your emotions about Russia and Crimea. But I want people to know that you are a dear and committed friend of the people of Crimea and the people of Russia. So to you, my friend, and we will do this again, I'm sure, and hopefully you can get the microphone fixed up. Now, Riva just raised her hand. She wanted to respond to Bruce. Riva, go ahead, take it away.
Just real quick. Bruce, you referred to NATO as cancerous and criminal, which of course I agree with. But I also think we need to put the UN in the crosshairs as at least being criminal. And even though I agree that the veto and the Security Council, but there, and you know the UN, I'm sure way better than me, but there's the fact that they can't even negotiate humanitarian evacuation. If we ever wondered whether the UN was irrelevant and in the pocket of the US, now is the time. So really, it's criminal neglect what the UN is doing from 8 years ago, needless to say, in the 2 Minsts and blah, blah, blah. But it's like NATO, we know, is meant to be defensive. The UN pretends to be peacekeeping, and this is the time to expose the bullshit. I really think they're one of the biggest culprits. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Riva. Tony Long wanted to say something before we leave. Tony, go ahead.
I do too.
And John, okay. Tony,
Well,
take it away. John, mute your microphone just for a minute.
all I wanted to add was, as long as we're, compiling a rogues gallery here, don't forget the EU. Ursula von der Leyen and Joseph Borrell and Charles Michel and that whole mob. I mean, they've been willing handmaidens of the United States and its globalist policy as well. I just wanted to make sure we didn't, not give them the credit they deserve as well for screwing this whole thing up. That's all.
Thanks, Tony. John Schuchart, you wanted to
Well,
say something?
I just wanted to end on a very hopeful note that I think all the Friends of Crimea should know, and that note is Elizabeth Murray. Elizabeth, I don't know if you remember being together with Jim and Shelley Douglas in Birmingham. Ray McGovern was there and you were there. Do you remember that?
That's right. That was a wonderful gathering.
Yeah. Well, your conversion from a full-time career with the Central Intelligence Agency to your witness to truth and humanity now. And I believe after you left Birmingham, you went on up to Ground Zero, the Trident submarine base in Puget Sound, and have been instrumental in bringing about the creation of a peace pagoda right on the property line of what Bishop Hunthausen called the Auschwitz of Puget Sound. Isn't that right, Elizabeth? Hasn't been that where you were?
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning Archbishop Hunthausen's, wonderful characterization of the Trident base there as the Auschwitz of Puget Sound. I think that one is one for the history books for sure, and we certainly will not allow people to forget it. But yes, for 7 years I was the member in residence at the Ground Zero Center for Nonviolent Action, and actually just in the past year, I've given over those responsibilities to the new activist in residence there. Her name is Kathy Railsback. And just by way of introduction, if any of you ever go to Ground Zero, there is a peace pagoda being constructed there under the auspices of the Nippon Zanmyo Hoji Buddhist order. It's on the Ground Zero property. We are right adjacent to the Trident nuclear missile base. I would like to take credit for helping start the Peace Pagoda, but that is all the initiative of, it's a 45-year-old dream of Guruji, who was the original Buddhist monk who had that dream. And I think there is a Peace Pagoda in Maine as well. Am I correct, Bruce? No, there isn't. So maybe
Leverett, Massachusetts.
Oh, okay.
And Grafton, New York. And one is being built overlooking the Oak Ridge, Tennessee nuclear weapons complex.
Well, thank you for correcting me. That's there should be one in Maine, but anyway, yes. Thank you for that, John. And all of that is right on. But the Ground Zero Center for Nonviolent Action, I just want to make another plug. They are part of the World Beyond War Peace Wave today, and that's actually taking place because of the timing of the NATO summit that is happening, I think, almost concurrently. Does it start on the 28th, or does it begin this weekend, I wonder? The NATO summit. Does anyone know for sure?
It's beginning very soon in Spain.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly when, but thank you for that, Elizabeth. I would like all of our friends of Crimea around the world to know about John Schuchart. He's a convicted federal criminal, was in federal prison for infiltrating a nuclear site and trying to destroy some nuclear weapons. So I would like people to know that some of you, all of you, have been very active and put your lives on the line in efforts for peace. So, does anybody else have anything else they would like to say before we close? Okay. Well, I want to thank all of you, and I want to let our friends in Crimea and throughout Russia and around the world that we are with you in the efforts for peace and justice, not only in Ukraine, but around the world. I thank you all for joining us in this message of solidarity with the people of Crimea.